So Eddie and Tony, thanks very much. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask you a little bit about your own background first before we get into talking about the boat club, right? So Eddie, would you just mind first of all telling me where you come from, Waterford, where you grew up and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm from Ferrybank, and there was 3 things you done in Ferrybank in that day and age in 1960. You played GAA, you went to the boat club, or you hung around. And hanging around wasn't an option. So at 16 years of age, I came down to the boat club to row. On the 3rd of March 1960, I remember it quite well. It was a terrible bad day. And that was the first day that I went out in a tub pair. And mentally, I've never got out of a boat since.
And did you like it from the start?
I took to it from the start. As I say to you, over in Ferrybank, it was the done thing. You just rolled down the hill and went into the boat club.
Okay. But it wasn't just for Ferrybank boys then?
Oh God, no, it wasn't. It's Waterford Boat Club, and that is something that has to be said. There's a lot of very good crews came out of Waterford. In the 1940s, there's something has to be said about it. In the 1940 in fact, there was 2 AGMs, one to shut down the boat club because it couldn't be kept going by private means, and one to keep it going. And the AGM to keep it going won out, and the boat club went public, knocking on doors to keep it going.
Okay.
And at that stage then, a lot of the crews came from Ferrybank at that stage, and that's why we have a lot of Ferrybank photographs on the wall. But in general, it is Waterford Boat Club.
Yeah.
The 23rd of May 1878, in the Mayor's Chambers in City Hall. Now there seems to have been rowing going on here, competitive rowing going on here before 1878. We have proof of that, but we don't have an awful lot.
Okay. And I know you said to me that originally the boat club started on this side of the river, before it went over to Ferrybank, and then they came back here again. So could you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it did. The original boat club was sited just about 200 yards to my right hand side here in Mr. Corcoran's field. And for some reason, I think it was maybe rates or rent, there was a dispute, and the club was transferred directly across the river from here. That was about 1880, thereabout, 1890. And following that then, in 1903, they had a fancy fair here. And that heralded in the opening of the old Waterford Boat Club that we all knew on the far side. Okay. And time caught us then, and we weren't wanted there anymore. And another thing happened with the very old club is that the building of the railway, the building of the new Ross Railway, the Rosslare Railway, 1900, the club had to shift its location for that too. It just had to shift out a few feet. So we were shifting the whole time. Okay. And 1980 then, we couldn't hang on there anymore, and we were lucky enough, and genuinely lucky enough, to get this building here. And consequently we're here now, and we're here to stay.
Great. And Tony, could I just ask you, how did you get involved, and where were you from in Waterford?
I'm just up the road from you, Ollie. I'm a Ballybricken man, centre of the town, the capital of Waterford. And how I came to join the boat club was, I tried hurling when I was 14, useless at it. Then I went and I played soccer, and I went to play for Joseph's. Couldn't get a game with them, tried to get a game with Hibs. And I was commonly known as the judge when I was with Hibs. The reason being, I was always on the bench, but I never got a game. So I was going down the quay one day, and I saw these lads going up and down the river in these boats. And they looked so elegant, and they were like swans, just gliding up the river. And I said, if I give this a go. And there was a ferry at the time that used to go over and back from the Ferrybank side shore to the Waterford shore. So I said, I'll chance this, I go over. So over I went anyway, and I was introduced to the captain of the day, happened to be Denny Sinnott. And I was kind of shaken now going over, because there were a lot of people around at the time there in the club, and this is all brand new to me. So I was ushered upstairs to be introduced to the captain. And the first question he asked me, he said, now in this club, he said, you need 3 things, he said, to be in this club, to be a member. He said, you need to have a trade, you need to have your fees, and you need to be a little bit mad. And I said, thank God I'm in. I said, I have all 3. But the insanity is still there after 54 years.
Okay. What was the thing about the trade then? What was it that they...
And there was, I suppose, like back in the time that Eddie was talking about, like back in the turn of the century, the early 1900s, the people that were involved in the club then, I don't think tradesmen might have been allowed in then.
Okay.
But then he was a good man for a laugh and a joke as well. Like he always made you feel welcome and made you feel at home when you came in. But a very strict man.
But what I'm saying is that it would have had, I suppose, a reputation as being fairly haughty-taughty.
Exactly.
At one time.
It was, yeah.
But I mean, I suppose, how did that change, or when did that change? What would you think of that?
I'd say there's over a period of time that the same could be said for golf.
Yeah.
But eventually there was more sports in the city.
Yeah.
Like you had no squash, you had a bit of tennis then at the time, and then you had more soccer clubs than you ever had in Waterford, and they were expanding. Hurling clubs were expanding. Various sports were expanding. So there's a place for everybody in sport then. And that'd be the way I'd see it anyway.
Okay. And now, I mean, everybody's welcome.
Everybody is welcome. And they were when I started first as well.
And also now women are welcome as well, because I mean, that changed, didn't it? When did that change?
That changed in the 70s, at the end of the 70s, into the 80s, beginning of the 80s. And it was probably the best thing that ever happened to the club. Because you had women on the committee, you had a different point of view, you weren't just listening to the men the whole time. Yeah. And of course, the ladies drew the gentlemen into the club as well at the same time. So things expanded from there.
It all works.
It all worked. It worked for Waterford Boat Club anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, I suppose the boats are very expensive, aren't they? I mean, to buy these boats are really expensive. So how do you manage to keep it all going?
It is all done through fundraising, through membership fees and the likes.
Okay.
And the capitals, the sports grants.
Okay.
Very, very helpful.
Okay, so you apply to the government for the sports grants.
That's right.
And like it's would you compete in all the national races, or how does it work? I mean, how does?
Mm-hmm. You compete in most national races. Well, we go to every city in Ireland, Dublin, Galway, Cork, go as far as Belfast. There was one year there we went to Coll for the championships, and that wouldn't happen too often that we go that far north. But that particular year we had a very good crew, so we travelled. Okay. And we've been up there a good few times since.
Mm-hmm. And when you were rowing yourselves, like, is it per weight, or how does it work? Is it, you know, if you're in a particular competition, do you have to? Is it if you're a certain weight, you're in this particular competition? How does it work?
No, it doesn't work like that.
Okay.
Only with one exception, that's the cox.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The cox now, you know, you'd want to be a little bit. You wouldn't want to be carrying around a 20-stone fella in the back of a boat.
Okay. So it's all about numbers then. So it's a single male against a single male and so on. And so
there's age limits. There are age limits. They're not weight limits.
Okay.
There are specific age limits. Junior 16, junior 17, junior 18. Then you have novice. You have intermediate. Then you have the senior categories A, B, and C, and elite. So if we had an elite 4 here at one stage. In fact, it was a women's 4, and I think it upset a few of the fellas that the women should reach the highest point that was ever reached in the club.
So it's like playing off scratch, kind of in golf or something like that. Okay.
There's one thing I forgot to mention about the club that's very, very relevant. It was started by Quakers. That is one thing sure. And the first rule that's on the rule book is that we are non-political and we are non-sectarian. Now, we don't care who you are, what you can do, you just don't expound your theories here, you row. And that's, I put that down to the real reason that we're here still 134 years after.
Okay. So it's very interesting that the Quakers had such an influence on the city, isn't it? Like that, and you were talking on...
And they had up to recent times as well. There was back there at the end of the 60s, back in 1968, the club was nearly defunct again, as Eddie was mentioned there earlier on. It was nearly defunct back in the 40s. But the same thing happened again at the end of the 60s. And there's a gentleman came back to the club, rolled his sleeves up, a man named Bobby Greer. He rolled his sleeves up and he gathered the troops. He brought members back that had been in the club 30, 40 years. And he gave them one job to do in the year. That was either to collect young lads, bring them over to the club, bring them home. He brought in his own coaches, his own coxes, and the club went sky high that particular year. And the biggest amount of people that ever rode in the club was in his era, actually. And he actually kept the club alive.
He did.
In his day.
He did. He saved it.
Yeah.
He pulled it up out of a nosedive.
So with competitions and all that, I mean, I know you've had some success recently, haven't you?
Yes, we have good success. There's an intermediate sculls championship in, and two of our young men have rowed on the Ireland crew in Hungary, and they have brought home gold. So there's nothing wrong with that.
And that's a fantastic achievement.
It is.
Okay.
We're the oldest club in the city. Now, we're not the oldest club in the county. We're not the oldest club in the county at all. Cappoquin comes in a little bit older than us at 1850.
But back at the end of the 60s there, if you recall, we used to open the club on a Sunday morning. We had no oarsmen. None whatsoever, nobody on the river. But a man named Nicky O'Rourke, I thought there was 3 or 4 of us used to go over every Sunday morning. And we used to open the old green gates that were in the club. And I said to Nicky one Sunday morning, I said, what's the point in opening the gates of a Sunday morning? I said, well, you have to go back down and close them again. He said, as long as the gates are open, the club is open. And the following year, that's when everything took off again. Bobby Greer came back and he brought back an army of helpers with him. And the result is, like you were saying now, Eddie, they're winning international races now as a result of those times.
It's not a sport that every young person takes in, mind you, because there is a discipline down here. And a lot of young people won't take discipline, but we have to have it because we're dealing with water. And when you put these boats out onto the river, these boats don't balance themselves. They're a perfectly balanced craft with nobody in it. But when you put a crew into it, if I put 8 people, would it be true of what I'm saying, Tony? If I put eight completely uneducated people into rowing, out in a net, and sat them out there, that boat would slowly but surely start going over and over and over to one side, and the chances are it would turf them all out into the water, because the boat is not able to handle it. You have to be able to balance that boat. If I teach 8 or 4 or 2 people to balance that boat and to get the horizontal and the vertical balance right.
But the good thing about it won't sink because there's a buoyancy aid under each seat. So with the buoyancy aid and the oars outstretched, your boat will never sink.
Yeah, I mean, the river, I suppose, people sometimes would be kind of scared of the river. But I mean, I suppose coming down to a club like this, they learn all the rules, they learn all the safety and all that kind of stuff. So
but safety is the first thing you learn when you come into the club. You're shown how to get into the boat, how to get out of the boat. Now that's shown to you several times before you're out at all. Yeah. If you do it wrong, you go back over it and over until you get it right.
You're told to get out of the boat,
then to bring you off, and the teacher to row then after that.
And what's it like? I mean, can you describe to people the thrill of actually rowing out in the river? Can you capture it? Something.
Oh, Tony, that's a hard one.
I don't know. It's just when I rowed or coxed, when I look at the lads out training summer and winter, it was always my aim to get those lads over the line first with all the work that they had put in training over the summer period and the winter period. And I just said to myself, when that boat would glide, this is it. This is what sport is about. Get up there, you're doing your best, lads. Get that over the line before the next guy. And the thrill of going over that line first, it's just unbelievable.
And then the senators say to us here, when you're feeling tired, you're not tired at all, you only think you're tired. Now come on, sit up to it. He was right. It's the slovenliness of the human body telling you it's tired. And just tell that to go away, I want to win this race. And stick into it.
And you mentioned the cox. that's the person that's in the front shouting at the guys.
He's the back
At the back,
actually,
so
yeah.
keeping them working as a team.
Oh, you would have to, yeah. But that's what you got to do. You got to keep them. The timing has to be perfect. You've got to get into the water together, out of the water together. Now, in the course of that stroke, you've got to get right up onto the balls of your feet and pull together. But everything has to be coordinated.
And what does a cock say? Give us some of the stuff that he says.
Well, at different points of the race, if you wanted to pick it up, we'd say to be like a jockey on a horse and he's coming up towards the finish and he'll take the whip out. You might say, "No, crew, I want a dozen of your best now." And they'll increase the rate of the rowing. And you'll work that up, that 12 strokes up. If you find that 12 strokes has worked for you, you keep it at that pace until you get over the line.
And would you have a rhythm? Would you be calling that a rhythm? Or
You do it by rhythm, yeah.
Okay.
You would do it by rhythm, yeah. I felt you go with the stroke. When they come towards you, you go with them.
That's right.
You talk with them.
Like a jockey.
Just,
He's
yeah.
off there like a jockey.
Yeah.
And the crew can call him all kinds of names in their mind, but we know that
Always did.
But it works
Oh, it does work. Yeah.
psychologically. Yeah.
to get it across for a young person is doing also. They're lifting their own weight. When they're racing, I mean racing about 36 strokes a minute, they're lifting their own weight every stroke. And you do that 36 times a minute. Can you imagine that? You lifting your own weight 36 times a minute.
But in the course of a race, if you saw one or two lads and the timing mightn't be right, you correct them on that and you try and bring them back and balance the oars then again and get the rhythm right. But when you cox a crew in a race, always give them credit. If there's somebody rowing bad, tell him he's rowing well and you'd see an improvement in him. But never tell a lad in a boat or a girl in a boat, never tell them they're doing bad or to improve. Just encourage them. Mm-hmm. And over the mile and a quarter, you'd find that they would
And then,
improve.
you know, if somebody's out rowing on their own, then we say the person who's the cox, whatever, will be on a boat nearby. Is just talking to him? Is that how it works?
No, you're literally on your own then.
Okay.
You're doing your own thing.
So you've
then.
no one shouting at you?
No,
Okay.
no.
A sculler or something else.
Okay.
There's a coach out next to him in the boat, all right.
Okay.
But he has to learn it all himself. He has to pick it
So
up.
do you have to progress onto that? You start off with fours and then go on to, or how does it work?
You're legally bound not to allow a person under 16 years of age, I think it is, to row with one oar. There'll be one oar out that side, one oar out that side. I'll show you the size of the oars now in a second or two. Because what the rowing union found when they started going into young people rowing is their bodies developed a twist.
All right.
Now, the body is twisted out again, or they got what they call growing bouts. For instance, an arm will grow an inch or two longer because of the constant exercise of that arm. But nowadays, you have to put young people out in a scull and they are coordinated and balanced the whole time until they come to about, I think they're 16 or 17 years of age, and then they can start doing sweep rowing, as they call it.
Okay. And would you be optimistic for the future of the club?
I would be. After the years I've spent at this club now, I'm at the club now 54 years. And I thought the club was dead and buried at the end of the 60s. But when you see the developments that are in the club today, I would see a great future for the club, particularly with the amount of boats we have then, or have now. Back in old days, by comparison with these boats here, we rode in coffins and wardrobes.
That's right.
That's the only way I could describe
Coffins and
it.
wardrobes.
Coffins and wardrobes, we compared to
And
the
crates.
boats today. Yeah.
So these are the real thing now.
Oh, they are. Yeah, they're the real Mackay.
And I suppose it's really important to say that people are very welcome to join.
Oh, good.
Anybody is welcome at any time.
Yeah.
These boats are made of Kevlar. They're a very shallow boat altogether. That 8 up there now. That 8, that's about a foot wide. and go back into Olympia, I didn't get the gist of
The metric.
of metric yet. It's about a foot wide and possibly just only a foot deep. And it's 63 foot long. Now, you get that into your mind. 63 foot long, foot deep, foot wide. That requires balancing. And to keep up in a net is great training for a young person. The concentration that has to go on. Watching the fella in front of you, watching his seat move, so you move at the same time. Now they all don't move bink, 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 bink. The idea is the man that's stroking and the man that's bow will move at the very same time. That takes training. And reach out, as Tony was saying, reach out, balance it the whole way and roll back, lift your own weight and back and out again. That takes training.
But when we were rowing back in our day, you had what they call clinker boats. Now they were big, heavy boats at the time, so they were an awful lot slower than the modern boat. And the clinker boat, there'd be one timber resting over another. But the skill in making those boats at the time, it was top class. But unfortunately, that skill is lost now. It's like a cooper making barrels.
That's right, yeah.
That skill is gone, and the skill of making these boats, that's gone as well. Everything is moulded now.
Yeah.
You know, that skill is dead and buried forever, unfortunately, which this club is not. We're here 137 years now.
Something like that.
So I think we'll be here for another 137.
I intend to be.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions you want to ask? That's anything that I forgot to ask?
Only one I can think of is what kind of changes would you have seen on the river in your time with the boat club?
Oh yeah, it's a good question. Just, you know, I mean, from going up and down the river all these times. I mean, obviously, Waterford was a very busy port back in your day.
Now, what happened to us on the far side is that the guys that built the club over there the first day, they knew the run of the tides. They weren't fools. They saw that there was not a build-up of mud over there. It was quite hard packed, in fact. But when Bell Ferry built its wharf, it changed the run of the tide. Do you remember that, Tony?
That's right, yeah.
It changed the run of the tide and it began to bank the mud up on our slip. So we couldn't stay there. Just couldn't stay. Had to get out. The ashes of a very old member of this club, a founder member, C.W. Mosley. His ashes are buried down at the end of the old club. That was his wish. And the man that told me that was a man I worked with while I was serving my time in the flour mills, a man called Arnold Morrison. He was a coach in the club and a vice captain in the club at the time. And he brought his daughter out in a boat to the end of the slip, and she dropped the urn down on low tide at the end of the slip. There you are now.
That's class. But I mean, when it was a busy port, it wasn't dangerous to be rowing on, was it?
You had to. The cocks will fill you in on this one. There's one for you, Tony.
I wouldn't say it wasn't dangerous to row, but we'd say you could go out of a night and there mightn't be much of a wind in it. And say if you're going upstream, what we call up the Long Reach, or gone up there beyond Granny Castle, up beyond the Red Iron Bridge. Well, if the wind changed there at that stage and you're up that distance, you could be in trouble. You'd have to be very careful coming back. You'd have to take it very slowly and you'd have to keep well into the shore. Other than that, there was no dangers, except when you're going downstream, there could be an incoming ship coming into the port. Well, what you done then is you went into the bank, you turned the bow of the boat, and you faced the swell that was going to come off the ship, and your boat would just ride on it.
Yeah.
So there was really no danger.
Yeah.
No danger.
As long as you knew.
But then again, there were so many safety rules within the club. They were all adhered to always. So there was never danger.
Okay. And would you see it now as sad that the river is so quiet?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like if
You would.
If you see a canoe along these days, you get excited. Like,
Yeah. And even the ships coming up and down, you'd miss those on the river. Sailors coming in and out, and
Yeah.
you would miss it.
You would miss it.
Yeah.
You would miss it.
And the names of the ships, you know, you get familiar with the names of all the ships that use the river.
Mm-hmm.
You had the little Kilbride, a small little boat that used to work between here and England. Then you had the Tusker, you had the Rockabill, the Great Western,
Great Western, yeah.
which back in those days you had cattle on it, and you also had passengers going to Liverpool.
That's right.
And that's gone.
And there was great knowledge of the river too, wasn't there, in Waterford? Like I remember people used to call themselves rivermen.
That's right.
They would know the intricacies of the river.
Well, we would class ourselves in that category because you have to. The mood of the river changes with every hour. It's a known fact that on a flood tide. Now, a flood tide is there's a thing called spring tides and flood tides, and people think that spring tides happen in the spring. They don't. They happen every month, but in the spring they happen to be stronger. Now, if you have a spring tide, we'll say you have a bad day, there's been a bad 2 or 3 days rain, and there's a breeze blowing outwards, and the tide turns to ebb. On the second hour of that ebb, that river can reach the fastest outgoing tide in Europe. It can hit 8 knots. Now, that's a rare one to happen, but it does happen.
Oh, it's lethal when it gets fast.
When the River Suret's is one of the fastest flowing rivers in Europe.
It is.
But what I like about today on the river is the wildlife. You can see wildlife coming back into the river again. You know, they've really cleaned up the river. Fair play to the corporation, they've done some work, but you can actually see day by day more wildlife coming back onto the river, both upstream and downstream. The joy of watching an otter out there for the last couple of years, and then to see the young and they playing away at night time there. Now, I hadn't seen that for years and years and years. The swans, you have children coming down to feed the swans with their parents or grandparents. They are back on the river in abundance again. Fish, birds. We're seeing birds now that we haven't seen for years and years, which I think is a great thing. But fair play to the corporation. They've cleaned the river up.
That's a really good point, yeah. I mean, so even though people might be saying sad things about the river going downhill, it's improving, as you say.
Oh, it is. There's a definite improvement in the river. If you see wildlife coming back to any area, there must be an improvement.
Yeah. But what about the mud? Is that a problem for you? I mean, is it getting worse, or how is it?
It seems to be staying much the same. Like, you had the old Port Lorga, the dredger that was here for years. But, well, people used to say when they take the mud out of the river here, the mud was back before the Port Lorga itself.
It came back
but
up
there doesn't seem to be much mud around here anymore. You know, it's not too bad.
So it's not a major issue then?
But if the mud came back before the workers, like, they still had a job, hadn't they?
No, it's not a major issue because the shipping is not up here. Okay. If the shipping was here, yes, you would have. The Johns River there now, that's silting up a lot. But I believe there's something in the pipeline for that. But then, you know, the pipeline can be quite a lengthy pipeline.
But then you'll be talking about the Port Lorga. There was one guy that on the Port Lorga, I won't mention any names, but he could be very nasty now at times to you, you know, depending on the mood he might be in. But we might see the Port Lorga go down the river and we shout out to him, "Bring us back a parrot, will you?"
That's right. A good story about that Port Lorga is that before the First World War, it used to go out into the ocean to dump its load. It just go out there and dump the mud maybe 3-4 miles out into the Atlantic and come back up again. The Admiralty decided in 1914, because of the importance of the port here, the naval importance of the port, that the Port Lorga did not go outside the harbour anymore in case she would be sunk by torpedo. So they said to go around the island and dump at the island. And they never changed it after 1914. They never changed it. They still went down around the island and dumped the load, and the mud was up before the
mud was up before the Port Lorga again.
That's class, isn't it? Okay, well,
but it was some boat, and it should have never. It was a sin to leave the port of water.
It was last working steamboat, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. In the British Isles, I believe.
The last working type of its engine,
yeah. In the British Isles.
Yeah, there was a mess with it.
It should have never been left out of the city.
there was a fella came over from Liverpool looking for it. He offered to buy it and bring it back here per annum, just to do it up.
Oh, yeah.
He says it's a very unique engine, double expansion.
It's a unique
I
boat.
believe.
With
Okay,
unique
well,
crews.
Liz, lads, thanks for million.